Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the soapbox of General Secretary Academic Affairs UG candidates. Today we have with us Dheer Bhanushali, who is General Secretary Academic Affairs UG candidate, and we have an esteemed panel. We have Rishikesh Bhaveskar, who is ex-GSA UG. We have Krishi Mantri, who was ex-ISA and head Empower. We have Lokesh Pawar, who is currently overall coordinator of student mentorship program, and we have Shaunak Natarajan, who was ex-chief editor. So let's start with the first section of Soapbox, which is a manifesto debate. I would request panel to start off with the questions. Firstly, let's start with the opening statement of Dheer.
Hello. Hi everyone. My name is Dheer Bhanushali. I'm a third year BTech student in the Department of Chemical Engineering, and I'm contesting for the position of General Secretary Academic Affairs UG. From the past 2 months, I've been doing groundworks to understand problems and issues faced by students, and also try to understand if there's any gaps that have been left behind in the online to offline transition, and any gaps that might arise because of the introduction of the new curriculum. And I envision and I plan to propose programs and policies that would help students identify and achieve all their career and academic goals.
Thank you, Dheer. Let's move on to the first section then. So I would request panelists to start off with manifesto debate. So just to give you a brief, there is total 45 minutes allotted to this section. A maximum of 9 questions or topics will be discussed, and each question can be discussed for maximum of 5 minutes. So yeah, let's start.
Thanks, Ayush. Hi, Dheer. So, starting with the manifesto, in the first point of the key initiatives, it's mentioned that you're going to pioneer an immersive cohort-based career design program. Can you help us understand what exactly are you planning to do in this? Because if we try to get some inferences from it, it's slightly difficult. Like, is it a course? Is it a program? Is it an event? Can you help us understand how are you planning to do it and what are the specifics of this?
Right. So I plan to envision this as a series of workshops that would run on the weekend during the semester. So again, the reason I want to do this is when it comes to deciding careers in IIT Bombay, there is not a lot of subjective thought that is put in by students, as in what kind of career that might be more suitable for them, or what kind of career might, unless the selection process doesn't filter it out on its own, what kind of career they might enjoy more or be more successful in, depending on their personality. So the idea was to start a program that could help students reflect on these aspects and then be able to map whatever they've understood about themselves to career opportunities. And then they would also be required to take actionable steps and make plans that would help them explore these options. So, do you want me to go on?
Yeah. So I have a counter to that. How is this different from the current events? Not exactly the preparation programs, but the initial events where the seniors come and get to know, let you know about the specifics of like consulting or analytics or finance boot camps and etc.
Right.
And how exactly do you help in getting that personalized aspect? You're saying that you want to develop personalized career choices for everyone. So in a cohort-based way of approach.
Right. So when it comes to the sessions that are already delivered even by the career cell, so what happens is you have some senior or some alum coming over and they're talking about what it's a monologue, like more or less it's a monologue. They're talking about the work that goes on, the work that they do. What I am proposing here, so the structure of this program would be, let me tell you about the structure of this program. So this program is based on the principles of design thinking. So what that does is essentially a way of thinking that is taught to you, which you can apply. Ideally, initially when it was started, it was applied to products. So it's something that you can apply to any product or any system to personalize it to yourself. So then you would apply that thinking on career choices. And this is like, so the content for this program is already ready, and it runs in a lot of universities abroad. In a lot of universities where they cannot provide individual career counseling. So what this does is...
let me stop you there. I think you can probably just focus on answering his question. The question is simple, right? I mean, how is it really different from what we're already doing?
Right.
And also to your point, it's not really, I mean, when alums come and talk about their careers, it's a very interactive discussion. They want to hear our questions, want to discuss with us, want to even discuss after sessions, like personalized sort of help or whatever, just discussion. So how is this any different from that, or one question is, how is it any different, and two, what goal is it really achieving that's different from the ones you're already doing?
Right. So the first way it is different is that this is a program that encourages you to think from scratch and then try to map career options to that. What you would do in these sessions is you would go to different sessions and then you would listen to what is happening, and then you would try to reflect or try to understand if you would do like this. But that happens without any solid structure, you can say.
Again, there is a confusion here. You are having a general session for design thinking for everyone, and then you are going to have that, like, we are still not sure that how exactly are you going to structure the complete program. Like, you are saying first individual different sessions, then you are saying that you want people to apply design thinking. Like, what is going to happen?
Right. So you can say that this is going to be a series of sessions with assignments. What the sessions would look like is, first you would be taught the principles of design thinking, then you would be required to apply those on yourself and career options, and then you would be required in your assignments. Through the assignments, the assignments would also help you discover what your preferential skills and things you'd like to work on are, and then you would come up with roadmaps that you would want to do to explore those careers.
Okay, and at what point in the journey of the student are you planning to introduce this? Is it first year, second year?
Ideally, I think this should be run for students in the third year.
Third year?
Yeah.
Just one question. So basically you're saying that students who complete the second year, who just got into an internship season, and post that or before that?
Post that. So second year, post that.
So they already have internships that they have gotten in like July or August. So after that, how it would make sense to give a career design program after they have gotten an internship, because internships are a very big part of what a career a person chooses.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the career design program should be after the internship is decided, which is I don't think it makes sense.
Right. So when I discussed this with professors, the thinking was students in the second year haven't had any exposure to the engineering as of yet. So, and they said it would be preferred if we waited until that happened, and even after the internship season, it's not the definitive end of a student's career choice, right? The placement season might still come up.
Yeah, so I guess the time allotted for the first topic is done. We can move on to the second question or topic.
So in your third point of the key initiatives, you mentioned that you're going to diversify the IEEE program to include design and MNC streams into it. So particularly talking about design first, so from our knowledge, the MDes program, which is conversion from BDes to MDes, it's already a very competitive process. Like only the top 10 DRs of BDes students typically get selected for MDes, and there are a lot of people who don't get selected for the MDes, which is conversion. So how do you plan to include the BTech students who have no background of design, no background of UCID when they came into IIT Bombay, to be included in a program which is highly competitive even for the BDes students?
Right, just give me 1 second. So the first thing about it being highly competitive, so again for the end, so when I discussed this with the professors and HOD from IDC, they suggested as an entry barrier, they would want to have a look at a student's portfolio, and also when it comes to no background, so students who would be applying for an IEEE in design, they would also have taken design courses in their in their fourth year, right?
So talking about these design courses, as far as I know, all the courses from IDC department doesn't run as per our normal academic slots, right?
Right.
So how do you plan to have maybe 4 to 5 courses for students who are doing BTech here?
There are a lot of, when I did the course mapping, there were a lot of courses and that were mapping from ITC, and there were a few that were mapping from the Mech and Civil departments as well. So the first option is those are available, but again those were from a few number.
Can you list down a few courses which you think that you have confirmed from the professors from IDC who you think might be relevant for the MDes IEEE?
So I did not get them confirmed by the professors, but there are some electives from the MEC department which IDC students can take. So when I did the mapping, I included them as electives.
Basically here we are talking about a proper full-fledged MDes degree.
Right.
And typically MDes degree is done by students who have done 4 years of BDes. So what you're saying is in their 4 years of BDes, they do some courses as a part of electives from mechanical department.
Right.
But those cannot be core courses for BTech students and then they can do MDes.
Right.
So how do you plan to inculcate the habit of inculcate the knowledge of core courses that is required in the 4 years of BDes? So if you talk about a regular IEEE, students have to do 3 or 4 courses which are the core or the foundation of the program that they are signing up for. And so have you looked at the core courses of IDC which can be taken up by these students, or are those just electives from mechanical department?
So the core courses from IDC, I have not compared them to the timetable and seen if those will be available. But then at the same time, that is one thing. And apart from that, when it comes to the selection criteria, so again, in fact, like if I'm going to add on, it was the professor from IDC that I'd gone to them to discuss another idea, and they proposed that we have a lot of competent students that come to us and we can't take them because like I can go on record to say that, and they said that we don't have a mechanism to do this. And second, they suggested that so as the entry barrier for the IEEE in design, they suggested that they would want to have a look at the student's portfolio as well. So if a student throughout their 4 years in the BTech degree, if they had worked enough to be able to have a quality portfolio, then they would be open to taking them in.
I have one question. Like currently there are very less seats for people to do MDes itself. The people who have spent like 4 years in their bachelor's degree to do MDes. So how exactly are you going to like validate that thing? Like there are going to be a lot of students in the BDes students also who do not get to do that MDes degree. So are you going to like, what is the mechanism for this increment of seats, or how do you want to cut down the students who are going to do MDes who have done BDes?
Right. So again, I have not discussed the idea of cutting down seats or having a fixed set of seats for BTech students. But what the discussion was that if they have quality students that can meet those criteria, then they would be willing to take them. But I have not explicitly discussed this, if they would be willing to have extra seats.
So what you're saying is there hasn't been any discussion in the sort of relative performance of a BTech student versus a BTech student, right?
So not in the sense in selection, but it was the professors suggested, in fact they told me that they have seen quality students from BTech. So then after that we didn't have a discussion on do you think if there are applicants, because anyways in all the other IEEE programs the seats are limited already, right?
So if I understand it correctly, there will be no special seats for the students who are applying outside IDC, right?
I have not discussed this yet, so I can't say that there will be.
One last question just on mathematics and computing. Like there's a very big problem in the mathematics department that we do not have good faculty for computing.
Right.
So have you discussed that and thoroughly came up with a plan that how exactly would you implement this?
Right. So I discussed this with the mathematics department, and again they said that is a problem, that we don't have enough faculty for computing. But so there are 3 to 4 professors that are there in the math department that can do computing. So it would be up to the student if they can find a professor who is willing to take them for a project. And if they are not, then they can't do the IEEE.
So what you're saying is the mathematics department is okay in having this IEEE MNC. It's up to the students if they find a relevant professor in the mathematics department. So they have agreed for this program is what you're saying.
So to quote unquote, the relevant authority from the mathematics department said it's a good proposal in principle. You can try to push it, but again they refuse to say that this will be done, because saying that this is not, like, I don't approve it, it's approved in the committee. But they said it's a good proposal. If you can find a prof, then why not?
Okay, and just one last question about this. So did you try to find the reason behind why MNC doesn't exist as a branch in IIT Bombay and exists in the rest of the top 5 or 6 IITs, IIT Delhi, IIT Kharagpur?
So what, not explicitly, but when I asked, so when I was speaking to professors from the CS department, if the CS department would be able to host the degree, what they told me is that the CS department as such, we are very overloaded and we are not willing to take in more students. So if they're adding an IEEE in MNC, they're not going to have a lot of students that are going to be added, right? The seats will again be limited. So they were open for that, but the CS department, the relevant authorities told me they're Like they can't take in a lot of more students.
Okay.
We can move on to the next question.
Talking about your fifth point in key initiatives, you have mentioned that you will propose an English and communications course under HASMED. May I know firstly the rationale behind it, and secondly how are you planning to do it?
Right. So the rationale behind this is right now for students that are struggling in English. So we take the English language test when first year students first arrive to the institute, right? And right now the students that are struggling, they're the bottom 100 students in that test, they're required to attend a British Council program. And there are a few problems with that program, one being that it's not credited, two being it's extra 6 credits of load that a student has to take, and 3 it's a different program as such. So there is a lot of stigma among students that so a student in that program would feel that they are made to attend a separate classroom entirely. So the idea behind proposing this was that for there should be some form of credited way for students who want to work on their English language skills. So the way I want to go about executing this is have an English language course under the HASMED humanities basket, and then students that perform below a certain level in the English test, we can allot them that course.
So if I understand it correctly, you want to say that, so you're saying those who have performed not up to the mark in those funneling tests, you will be allotting them directly the English course, right? Do you know why HASMED has been implemented? Because students need some kind of freedom in choosing the courses, right? What about that fact?
Hello, am I audible? Audible. So the thinking that is true, but what we also consider is that the new curriculum already offers students a lot of flexibility in terms of the electives they'll have to take, right? So students have to take 3 HASMED courses anyways, and apart from that, after their 6th or 7th semester, they're only doing electives. So if a student was given so that flexibility exists with them already. So I agree in the sense that in the first year that flexibility is taken, but we need to provide some form of credited way to provide students struggling with English to.
So you're okay with taking away freedom from students, right?
In this context, I don't think it is so much freedom that we are taking away. Like if you have to take 12, if you get to take 10 to 12 electives in the new curriculum, and then we say that there's one elective that you can't take because
But the electives are not offered in the first year, right?
Right.
This is the only possible course where they can choose something.
Right, in the first year, yes.
Right. Then still you're okay with taking this freedom from them and implementing what they need.
So if you have to ask me in yes or no terms, then right now I think it is the most feasible way to provide students with an opportunity to develop their English skills if they're struggling. So like if that means a yes, then yes.
Okay. Also, why don't you have, instead of including it in HASMED, why don't you introduce a different course maybe?
Like entirely
different course?
So yeah, so I considered that possibility as well, and that happens in a few IITs. It happens in IIT Delhi and Kanpur, but the problem with that is if you make one course for everyone, so the population, the demographics in the students are not going to be such that everyone needs an English course, right?
Yeah, not for all students, maybe just those 100 students.
But then there has to be a way to fit that into the first year curriculum as well, right? Because if you're struggling, you would rather, we have to provide this in the first semester or year itself.
Okay, so even if we are okay currently to taking away freedom, I see two problems in this thing.
Right.
First is the funneling mechanism. Because currently the funneling mechanism is due to that English test which takes place, and that is completely based on student discretion because...
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Okay, so I have two problems which I see here in the initiative. So first is the funneling mechanism. How exactly are you going to segregate those students who are weak at English? Because current mechanism is it is completely based on student discretion. Because the students check the paper and they decide that is there. And the second thing, what I had a problem is what kind of English would you like to teach? Like that is also not, like what kind of course would it be?
Yeah.
So have you had a chance to speak to people or the structure of the course?
Right. So coming to the first point, the fact that it is going to be checked by students. So the argument is that even right now it's checked by students, and so it's not mandatory or credited in a way, but it is very strongly pushed upon the students that this is a mandatory course that you have to do already. So in that sense, it is.
No, I'm not asking that. I'm asking what is going to be your funneling mechanism.
So so you want me to
How are you
describe
going to
what kind of
segregate
test?
students who are weak in English?
In the similar way that it is done right now, right? We have
Do you feel that that is a good mechanism to do it? That there might be chances students who are not good might get left out, or and you are actually making it official, like from the IIT Bombay side, like
Right.
in their curriculum. Don't you feel that is going to, like, there should be a very strong funneling mechanism or a very strong segregation mechanism?
There should be, but it still happens right now, right? So I'm
Currently,
The question is, do you think the current mechanism is efficient and effective?
I cannot comment on that. I'm not entirely aware to
and
comment.
second point, you want to address something?
Yeah.
You want to say something?
Yeah. So in the second point, the kind of English that we'll have to teach, again, it will be the kind of English that is, it's something that is more discussion oriented, or something that teaches people with, something that equips people just enough to get prepared for the curriculum, that prepared to attend the classes that is coming ahead. So I understand that it cannot be a simple course that is taught like a traditional course where a professor teaches you something and gives assignment. It will have to be something more interactive and something that engages students. So the idea behind that is also, when I discussed this with the institute admin, so right now when we talk about the British Council program, we pay 15,000 a student, that is 15 lakhs. So it's in fact, the admin agreed that it's in fact a much better allocation of resources to say have a lot of TAs. Say have if you have 150 students, have 10 TAs. So that is a much better allocation of students as well, because even in the British Council program for 100 students they have 4 TAs. That is also not enough.
One last question on this. So you mentioned that you're planning to take this course under HASMED for the students whom you identify as students who are struggling with English. So how do you plan to work around the logistics of it? Because currently the HASMED allocation happens like how pre-reg allocation happens. Like they choose some courses and then the courses are randomly allotted. So how do you plan to take out these students so that they are only allotted this English course and not what are you thinking about the logistics?
We would have the test data, right? And then we can just input that in the backend. And so the students that are below that grade, they can be allotted that course anyways, right? So like I'm not sure what you mean by the logistics. It's just
Basically,
something.
yeah, there are, so for example, there are 5 courses which are HASMED courses.
Right.
There is a 6th course which is an English course that you have introduced. So currently the 5 courses allocation works in a way that students register for it in the preference and they get allotted the courses. So with the introduction of this English course, there is a certain set of students who are supposed to get this course. So are you planning to take them out of that HASMED allocation process, or how are you planning to do the logistics on ASC?
So I have not had a discussion on the exact logistics and implementation on ASC, but it would seem feasible. Like if we have the authority to just to give you an idea about the feasibility, if we already have the authority to input some code in the backend that can do the allocation, like if we can input something which says do it randomly, why shouldn't we be able
If,
to?
like, do you know or just
No, I
guessing?
have not discussed this.
Okay.
I have not discussed the.
Let's move on to the next
implementation.
question.
Yes. So your first point of academic and policy reforms is on the ARP policy, and you said that you want to make it student friendly and implementable. So can you please give details on what exactly you want to do with the policy, and do you know what exactly the policy is?
Right. What do you mean when you say do I know the policy?
Like what exactly do you mean when you say that you just want to make a policy
Right.
student friendly?
So I thought of a few policy changes. One, so first of all, when it comes to the implementability, right now, so starting off with registration. So right now what happens is, an ARP student can register on ASC, and then the ARP FACAD, so I've spoken to ARP FACADs, and they said they just get a message that this is what the student has registered for, do you approve this? So the idea, so again, so if I, just one more, if I want to set some context. So, hello, am I audible? So when discussing, just to set some context before I go on to my answer. So when I was discussing with ACADS and ARP mentors and the SMP, the feedback I got was that generally students that are in ARP and that are actively communicating and trying and putting efforts, those are students that will gradually move out, more likely that they'll move out of ARP compared to students in ARP that are not responding, that are not meeting their FACADs, that are not talking to their mentors. So the idea being, if a student wants to register for courses and so a student should have to meet their FACAD, right? So the first change I wanted to propose was a student should have ARP students would have to manually register through their FACADs. So that is like the first change I wanted to propose on the implementability front. Then another change when it comes to student friendliness. So right now, students when they reach ARP, a letter is supposed to be sent. A letter and email is supposed to be sent to their parents. So parents and wardens. So when it comes to parents, sending a parent a letter that your child is in ARP is not something that is effective, because one, that kind of triggers panic, and then a parent would receive a letter and then they would panic, and then they would go to their students and they would tell them what is happening. And again, there is no clear communication. Like a student can just tell their parent no, like they can lie in that sense as well, because we don't know how much parents understand these things, right? So a thing that I would want to propose on the student friendliness end is and the ARP FACAD should reach out to their parent and then talk about the situation rather than just sending across a letter.
So if I get it correctly, first change which you want to make is manual registration. Secondly, better communication between FACAD and parents, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Talking about manual registration, do you see there will be any problems apart from just sending students to FACAD?
The first problem is there is a possibility that students don't come to their FACAD at all. That is a possibility. The second being the students have to be on time. So when the institute starts, they have to be here.
Alright. And do you think that all the registration process happens once the semester starts? Most of the registration happens when students are at home, right?
Right.
Then?
But even so the registration period continues, right? But the FACADs can also do the registration, like they can set up an online meet as well, right? When if they want to.
I don't get what exactly the change is. For example, currently student needs approval from FACAD, right?
Right.
As far as I know, FACADs do reach out to students if they see any problem in the registration, or even students do reach out to FACADs if they see they need any already some kind of communication which happens between the students and FACAD. That is why the separate message gets out.
Right.
So what do you exactly propose
So
to change?
it is supposed to be like that, but what happens is if a student usually goes to FACAD and then they just put in a registration, and if the registration is meeting the criteria, then ARP FACAD usually tend to approve it. But this is something that there is no way they do that. The students there will have to be some contact with the FACAD.
I mean, the extra notice which FACAD gets is the extra communication, right? What exactly do you want to achieve by having this meet firstly? Because there is already communication which happens.
So FACAD said there is not always communication that happens during registration. So it's happened that students have just, like some student has registered for 30 or 40 courses and they've just sent it on ASC and the FACAD has to approve that. So
then if the idea that it's not right, then you can just disapprove, right?
Right, so they disapprove in those courses, but even in other cases, so FACAD suggested that it would be better if there was some interaction, and the FACADs would also help them plan out what courses to take from their backlog. So that is something that does not happen. In this case, they would be forced to engage in that interaction.
So your intention is to just make sure that some communication happens between students and FACAD, right?
Initially, yes, there has to be for registration.
Understood. Talking about the second part, you said that currently the letter goes to parents, right?
Yeah.
Do you know any students who has received letter at their home?
No.
Then how can you claim that it happens?
The policy says that this is what happens.
The policy has been formed 3 years back. There has been no meets for, there has been no ARPC happened for last 2 years. So the policy is not already implemented.
Right.
Secondly, how do you try to solve the problem of better communication with parents if the FACAD just sends out letter to the parents?
So that they'll be suggested that they should meet at least online or talk to the parent, right? That is what I'm suggesting should happen.
And what is the rationale behind that? Why do you want to do this?
Because a parent, like I said, the reason that I wanted to do this, like I said earlier, that a parent just getting a letter or an email that your child is an ARP and they don't even understand, in most likely in the case that they don't understand what is happening, they are likely to get scared and they're likely to reach out to their their children in a way that is not supportive of them. So if it's for a student that is already panicking, you realize that an email was sent to your parent and your parent is suddenly asking you, okay, you're an ARP, what is this?
Also, any rationale behind not letting students talk to their parents rather than asking FACAT to talk to the parents?
Right. So I think in a case like ARP, so like when I was discussing this with the professors, they said that the ideology behind ARP was if this does not exist, you would have eventually been scheduled for termination. But this is kind of a chance for you to work on that. So there should be, I think, if it comes to that end where maybe in two semesters you could get a SEM back, or in 3 semesters your degree of being an ARP or degree could possibly be terminated. There should be some indication from the institute side to whom.
Understood. Any consent will be taken from student before reaching out to their parents?
I think the students should be aware of this, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't entirely believe that we should allow students to say that this is not something you want to, you should not tell home. Because there is the only reason being there is a real possibility that if you don't stick in the ARP program and do this successfully, you could possibly be sent home. So in that case, there is a duty to communicate to students at that there's something wrong with it.
Let's move on to the next discussion topic.
I'll talk about this push to introduce an FE grade. Can you explain what this FE grade is and what goal it's trying to achieve?
So the idea of an FE grade is, how I envision the FE grade is, it's supposed to be an alternate fail grade. So this is, if you get this grade, you would fail the course and you would be required to repeat the course. But if there is another course that has the course in which you got an FE grade as a prerequisite, you would be able to take that course.
Okay, so basically what will end up happening, so currently what is the scenarios, you either get a DD or an FR. If you get an FR, you fail.
Right.
And then if you want to take a course that has that course as a prereq, you need to take permission from the course instructor, right? If you want to do the next course.
Exactly.
Right. So in this case, what you're basically doing, from what I understand, is you're shifting the onus of that decision from the, let's say, 3xx course instructor to the 2xx course instructor, basically.
Right, to the previous course instructor.
Right, so what is that achieving?
So the reason being, the previous course instructor is someone that would be able to comment on how much exposure you have on the course, right? The new course instructor can't, they don't know you. So like if you are a student that a professor doesn't know how much exposure you have, on paper you have enough exposure for an FR, then it is very clear that the previous instructor said you're not competent or you don't have enough exposure in this subject to take up the next course.
But don't you think the new instructor knows more about their course rather than the earlier instructor?
Right, but the reason that you're not taking that course, the previous course is a prerequisite, right? So the new instructor, all the new instructor needs to know is, do you meet that prerequisite? Do you have enough exposure for me to say that whatever prerequisite criteria the previous course set, you meet that, which the new instructor cannot know, which the old instructor would know.
So what about the fact that it's a prerequisite for a reason, right? I mean, you have to be able to do that course to do the next course, and if you are failing that course, I mean, what odds are there that you're going to pass the next one without passing the previous one?
Right.
I mean, it makes no sense, right? That's why the fail grade, and that's why then get rid of the prereq system entirely, right? What's the point of that?
Right. So first of all, like just before I answer that logically, there is precedent of this happening in IIT Kanpur. So like I just named it FE grade here. They have an E grade there that happens. Second, when it comes to, so this is not something that would be mandated in the relative grading scheme. Like this is not something that will be mandated in the relative grading scheme where you say someone from 100 like A, B, S, give an FE grade below DD. This is like an added flexibility that professors would have in case by case situations. Say for example, some student was sick during a part in the semester, but they were active in class, and a professor feels that talking to them that they have sufficient exposure or at least some exposure. So this is like an added flexibility given. It's not something that.
So if the professor feels that the student has an added exposure and they are well versed with the content, then why would they give an FR grade or a fail grade in the first place?
Because the reason profs are hesitant about giving a DD grade or an FF grade is, if a student gets those grades, then they won't repeat the previous course. A professor still feel like to a student, I need you to pass my course. Like, understand you have exposure, but you didn't pass this.
I have one question: what to do in a situation like your main aim behind it is to avoid that cascading of FRs, but aren't you just what to do in a situation you are not? Aren't you just increasing the burden? Like, you need to do the course earlier. What if the student has that limited exposure? Like, FE grade means the exposure is going to be limited, and he fails the course which had it as prerequisite. Then again he needs to do that course. Isn't it just increasing the burden?
So like if they fail the next course, then again, like I'm not sure how we can consider that, because like you can get a DD grade in the course, just pass and still fail the next course, right? So that is not something that
But you need not to repeat that course earlier, right? Like the earlier course also.
if you
again.
got an FR, so like you would get an FR and you're still repeating that, right? You would get an FR and if you got an FR, you would still repeat the old course. You would just not be able to take the new one. You will also not be able to take the new one. Now, if you get an FE, you repeat the old course, but you can maybe take the next one.
But that's adding a burden, right? Because they anyway have to do the course, the FE grade course once again, and they don't have enough exposure to the prerequisite course, and they're still doing the next course. So essentially, what we are trying to say is, this might be changing the onus of decision of clearing the prerequisite from one professor to another professor, but we don't think that it is reducing the cascading backlogs, because cascading backlogs takes place because of the absence of knowledge or absence of exposure to a particular course, and that is not going to change because just of a grade. It is going to depend on the course instructor and the student.
Right. So one thing what I meant by cascading backlogs is your inability to even take a course because your inability to even take a course because another course is a prerequisite. Like if you are a second year student and you get a backlog or an FR in say your third semester course, most likely you will probably not be even able to take. So in a third semester, if a course has a prerequisite and is a prerequisite to a fourth sem course and you fail that, you'll probably not. Yeah, you'll fail. You'll not be able to take another course in the fourth semester. So something like that. So when you're not able to take a course only because of prerequisites.
So going back to how it will get implemented, so if I understand it correctly, it's again at an individual level, right? The professor will get a chance to say the students will get FE grade or not, right?
Right.
So even the if I understand the current mechanism, even the prerequisites are waived off on special occasions or special cases, and that is again taken individually. So this initiative or maybe the manifesto point is making the system effective.
So prerequisites can be waived off on special request, but when I spoke to professors, they're usually not keen because they're not keen to waive off prerequisites. Like that is the problem. They're not keen to waive off prerequisites because they feel the previous instructor gave him an FR.
I mean, if that's the case, then why do you think anyone will be keen on this FE grade? I mean,
So like if the previous instructor gave you an FE grade and it means you have you have some
no, what has
exposure,
happened is the student has failed the course, right? So why do you think why do you think your push will even lead to anything if instructors aren't keen on waiving prereqs? Isn't that the problem? Isn't that the problem that instructors
Like,
aren't
I
keen?
didn't understand. Can you
Instructors aren't keen to waive off prereqs, right?
The next instructor aren't keen to waive off
Yeah,
prerequisites.
exactly. I agree. So my point is then, why is anyone going to agree to this FE grade?
Because
You're literally doing that, right? Essentially.
No, so the previous instructor has taught you and has gauged your understanding, right? So like that is the point. Why will you as an instructor want to?
Right, exactly. So you have failed that course, essentially. Why will the next instructor? It's essentially the same thing, right? You're waiving off the prereq because okay, you failed that course, but I'll let you sit in this course because you have an FE instead of an FR. I mean,
Right, that's what I said.
but you're essentially waiving the prereq, right? That's what's happening.
If you get an FE grade, yes.
Right, and my point is then if your rationale is that instructors are not keen on waiving prereqs, you're essentially forcing instructors to do that.
Because right now there is no way for. So right now, if the previous instructor in any way wants to communicate this, that I think you have some exposure, but I'm failing you, they'll the only way to do this is tell the new instructor that hey, this kid took my course and he failed, but I think he has some exposure. I think you can take him. So that is not something that instructors will do, right?
Yeah, I guess we are done with the time for this section. We can move to the next question.
Yeah, we can move on to the
Next
next part. So, talking about the first point of your web and infrastructure section, you have mentioned that you're planning to develop a portal for NOCS allocation for first year students to systemize and optimize the selection process and ensuring uniform timelines and transparency. So, firstly, what is the need for it? It has been happening since a very long time, and there have been there might be edge cases where one particular year might have faced an issue, but it has been running very smoothly from a very long time. So what do you plan to do in this, and what's the requirement of this in the first place?
So it has been happening, but the point is still. So right now, how the allocation happens is someone from. So there's four people involved: the NSSOC, someone from NCC, usually the NCC admin head, the GSCA, and the GSSA. And what would happen is one of them would go to the ASC office, collect the data, and then they would come here. They would like allocate based on preferences manually. Then they would give that to, so the NSO people, NSS and NCC do the trials. NSS does the reading themselves. Cult and sports people would give it to the instructors and NSO coordinators, and then they would do the trials. Then they would give back the data to them, and then they would sit again manually, and they would say that this is for this person, like that. You understand that it's something that is very chaotic. Like you're allocating students a course for a year, and you just do the trials and come and manually discuss with each other. You take this guy, I take this guy.
We understood the problem. How are you planning to solve it?
So the idea would be that I discussed this with the web team and DevCom OC as well. So the idea would be to make a portal where based on whatever trials that the bodies are conducting, they would input their results of the trials over there, and then they would the allocation would happen on the portal automatically.
Can you explain the timeline of first 2 weeks maybe? How the trials will go on, when the portal will be active, when the NOCS people will be uploading the data?
Right. So when I discussed this with the DevCom OC, they said that they can build this in 2 to 3.
Not about the development of the portal, about how and when the NOCS people, the heads of the respective department will upload the data. Because the trials happens at different timeline. The trials of culturals, maybe trials of sports happens at different level. Even the individual sports trials goes on. For some sports, maybe it takes a week. For some sports, it takes 2 to 3 weeks.
So the trials happen. Sports wise. So for example, like if you go to NSO, then there will be a different trial happening for hockey. Like for a couple of days, for X days it's hockey, and something else is going on simultaneously, and it's scattered like that. So what would happen is every night the trials happen, they would input the data on their portal, and what would happen is, so for example, a student with a preference 1 of say NSS hockey, they got selected. So automatically that it shows to all the other bodies who are supposed to be taking a trial for this person as well. So then they can avoid that.
Okay, but for example, let's assume the case that someone wants to take NSS as their first priority,
Right.
And they have started maybe taking trials in NOCS, and in between they think that they also want to give trials for all 3 sports. Irrespective of, it's up to the students whether that he or she should go for trial or not. Irrespective of he gets
Right.
NSS, right?
Right.
So even if he or she gets an NSS as their first priority, he can still choose to go for trials.
Right.
So this is anyways not solving the number of trials, or maybe this is anyways not lessening the number of trials you will give in NSS.
Right. So what I'm doing here is like, so I'm not changing the number of trials, because the number of trials are fixed. Like an instructor will come and there'll be a proper schedule, and that will have to be followed. What will happen is the allocation that is done manually, just that is getting automated.
So will this automated allocation be ironclad? Like
No.
so because like the sense being a lot of times students realize very late. They go and request the coaches. The
Right.
coaches try and get them into NSO, or they get into NSS. They change their streams, whatever that has happened. So like, do you want to streamline the process, or is it just automation of things?
It's streamlining. Like technically, no portal ever is ironclad, right? You can always change something at the back end. It's just an added
you can change it at the
functionality.
back end, but are you trying to change the process, or are you just automating the process?
Can you?
Like, are you trying to say that the allocations what happened through the portal needs to be ironclad, or they are just going to be like, once it happens it cannot be changed, or you want it to be as flexible as it today, only just it will happen through a portal?
Yeah, that is what I'm. The latter. That is what I'm envisioning.
So you just want to make a portal on which they can just exchange information. Everything is left. The complete selection process, which is just chaotic, is in the hands of the people who are selecting.
So basically, you are just shifting from Excel to maybe the portal.
Excel to the portal currently.
Right. So like the selection process can't be changed from our end, right? The
No,
what?
but your main point says that you want to streamline the selection process, the timeline, and the transparency. So I don't see that happening just through a portal. That the portal just helps in information exchange. Like it can help a little bit of transparency, but there is nothing like streamlining of the timelines or
Right.
streamlining of the process of selection.
So the one way it streamlines the process is what happens right now in NSO in sports when they're conducting a trial is like if an instructor say sees a student who's applied in 2 places and he can see so right now what happens is they'll do the trials and then at night they'll sit with the other
So
instructor like
this can be also done by maybe an Google Doc or something which is live sheet, as simple as that instead of any portal.
so what like let me
If it's just about putting out the data at the night of the day, it can be done in any dynamic form. So if you agree on the fact that this is just the point just says that you are shifting from Excel to portal, we can move ahead.
Not exactly Excel. Like you can say in technically like every portal is a database, right? So even ASC is a database. But the added functionality when on discussing with the people that I did the groundworks with, we felt it would be worth it. So yeah, like if that is
No, but like
what
the question is simple. Right? I mean, he just asked you whether it's shifting from Excel to portal, because you mentioned all of these other things like systemize, optimize, uniform timelines, transparency, all of that. But what is essentially happening is you're moving from Excel to some DevCom made portal. That's it, right?
And one more thing that will change is, so for example, right now if a student has applied in 2 places in NSO, so like if both of those trials happen, so both the instructors would sit together and sometimes they would, so like if an instructor has 2 students that are on the equal level, right, they see that one of them, even though he's slightly better, is getting selected somewhere, he'll let that person go and he'll take another person. So this is something that they do manually in the end, but this is something they will be able to do dynamically on the portal. Like they'll be able
Exactly
to see
the live Excel sheet.
Last one question.
You can say that it's added functionality, but yes.
Okay, let's move on. So, talking about the third point of your student support services section, can you just read that for me once?
Ensure course mapping between the new and old curriculum to smooth backlog registration.
How is this an initiative?
It's something that I will do. It's not something new that I'm going to.
Isn't it a duty?
You can. I mean.
So essentially, this point of a GSA UG candidate manifesto states that you're going to take 10 courses, you're going to map it to the next 10 courses which are already available, and that's it. That's I think around 1 hour of effort, and it's a part of a GSA UG manifesto. Do you think it can be here?
Let's stick to manifesto.
It doesn't always happen, right? There is a lot of effort that will go in convincing departments and professors about letting.
It's possible that many of the GAs might not do their basic duty, but do you want to add that duty in your manifesto is the question, I think.
I felt like this was something that was it was necessary that I would do this and I wanted to. Right?
Okay, so can move on.
Fine. So, can you once again read the second part of Career Cell?
Establish Career Connect, a community to empower interaction among students, seniors, and alumni based on career interests and
And
aspirations.
can you just lay down the logistics of it? Like, what exactly do you want to do in it?
Right. So the problem, what I want to do is right now, at the UGC, we get a lot of requests about people that are looking for people with similar interests. So, like for example, CC gets a lot of requests of connecting them with students and seniors who are preparing for UPSC, or the clubs get requests for people that are pursuing something similar. So, the idea was to do something the way curious community functions is find out people based on these interests and connect them, and then also from the graduating batch, look for seniors who are graduating and ask them if they'll be available on these groups to be able to help our students.
So exactly, you're making a platform and where you just want to connect students to each other. So
Right.
isn't that something what actually happens through a lot of platforms? What Career Cell makes, what Empower makes, like.
So the groups that we make, I mean, we add like everyone joins them because we say that these are for information dissemination. It's not the case that students that like the students on the finance club group, they're not there because they're specifically interested in finance, or they're looking for people with similar interests. So a lot of times what happens is students reach out to us and they say, I want someone, for example, in my tenure, what happened a lot of times was some student would say, I'm looking for someone with a similar interest. Like for a competition, I want a team member. And then we would ask them to reach out on the groups, and on the groups would be very unresponsive because one, there's a lot of people and they know that it's meant for information dissemination. It can be spammy. They're not places where you go to look for people with similar interests.
And how do you get the subject matter experts or the people you are trying to get, like interaction among students, seniors, and alumni based? Like how do you plan to get them on the platform?
We would ask them if we like from the same way we are identifying people in the current batch. So the plan was after our events, say for example, a simple way to gauge students' interest would be to see, like for the simplest metric would be say if they're attending your events. Like if Empower organized some session in Curious Community, then it's likely that students that are attending, they are more interested. So after our sessions, we can onboard students.
Onboarding students is not a difficult task. Onboarding people who are going to answer their questions, like the seniors, the alums, is something which is very difficult.
Right.
Like especially for UGAC, contacting alums, we have contacted alums to get like the recent alums, but getting much more. So how exactly are you going to get them on board to that platform so that they answer questions?
So I am talking about more recent alums. Like I'm not talking about alums.
And you're planning to like introduce this community on WhatsApp or what?
Either WhatsApp or Discord.
Okay.
So next is third point of like the promotion of work experience and research, which is based on the research portal. So what exactly is the new thing you try to propose? Because this has been an initiative which has been going on or being worked on from a lot of tenure. So what is exactly the new thing you're proposing here?
I mean this to be a follow-up. Like I've said, complete building the portal.
So you just want it to be a follow-up. And do you think, like, what exactly do you think would be the exact utility of research portal?
So one, it being a portal for people to apply for all the Empower events, SERP, SERP 4. Second, it's a way for us to disseminate information on external research opportunities. So right now it happens through WhatsApp groups. So this is like we've seen, it happens that students are not aware of the WhatsApp group and they don't know where to go, right? Like how will you even think that there is a WhatsApp group where Empower is sending all kinds of useful information? And especially since the placement cell has stopped sending information, MyTax and DadWise have stopped coming through the placement cell. This is also a place where we can send that information, because all of that was happening through WhatsApp groups right now, which like no one, if someone that got left out, they wouldn't think of that. So
why don't you think the Facebook page of Empower is not, because that exactly has a lot of reach. Getting a reach for a new portal is going to be much more difficult. Like we create a lot of portals, they are like for a short time frame, like
right.
for the summer undergraduate research program or the in-semester undergraduate research program. But like how exactly are you going to get the reach? And we have it separate, like Facebook page has been there for a lot
right.
of tenures and it has gained the reach it has. So why do you want to do that again?
Right, but Facebook pages are slowly dying out, right? Like all the Facebook pages, even the student support group on Facebook, that is also something that is losing reach. Like the reviews that were there and the number of questions which people asked previously compared to now. And we are transitioning to Resuben in terms of reviews, right? So why can't we do something similar here? Like I agree that initially when we start off, there might be some inertia, but it's a good thing.
But I don't
it's-
see a solution to it. Like, yeah, I agree that Facebook is, but why is the solution is develop new portal and get people on it? Like, I don't see how exactly are people going to shift from Facebook to that portal.
I mean,
Because
everyone.
if they're not coming on Facebook, which is actually prevalent. Why are they going to come on that portal?
So the question is, you don't think people will use the portal, right?
Yeah, because I'm not seeing a utility which you are like, not a specific utility. You just said that what exactly we get the opportunities we are going to put on the portal.
Right. So like then we can make the same argument for all the portals, right? Like for Resuben and for InstiApp as well. Like InstiApp we get placement information, but apart from that, when even students that are in the first and second year use it, right? So first, for any student that wants to apply to SERP, ISERP, they're going to use it anyways, and we have a lot of applicants in SURP, ISURP. Anyway, so that transition is going to some extent is going to be enforced by that. Like those students have to use it anyways, and then it will grow as with time.
Fine. But
Yeah. So
yeah.
we are done, right?
Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so your second point of external relations, conduct Ask Me Anything sessions with admissions officers from target international universities for graduate applications. I mean, how are you going to do this?
We're going to reach out to admissions.
No, yeah,
officers
but
via
I mean, do you think it's feasible?
yes. So I discussed this with the not the Dean IR, but the people working with the Dean IR, and they said that we can do this. Like we can reach out to them, and it happens in a lot of universities already. So.
But do we actually have like contacts with those universities which are actually the target of students to get into?
Just heads up, guys. Last 2 minutes.
Yeah. Like how exactly are you going to build that connect? Like if you are trying to bring big universities
Right.
like MIT's graduate committee or some other like the Stanford's graduate committee to come and like how exactly are you going to build that contact? Do you feel that our IR office has that contact, or is there some mechanism you've thought of? Because you're saying that target international universities. So that is something which means that you need to cater to all the universities. Like targets are actually the ones which are famous, and that is something
Right.
people prepare for the most. So how are you going to make those contacts?
Right. So some of the target universities are also our partner universities in some form or the other anyways. So that is one aspect that will be covered.
Can you name few?
NTU, Monash.
Okay.
Yeah, so like those are the two I'm aware of. And then apart from that also, so like we are IIT Bombay, right? So like again if I mean I'm not sure.
How does it answer the question?
Right. So we are one of the most like credible universities in India, and I think this is something that if the IR office tried, they should be able to do because
Then at this
should
point, so you see the kind of universities that do come, right, in terms of like these emails that we get for call for
Right.
research scholar positions and all of that. They are at a certain level, and the ones that we are calling target universities are at a very different level, right?
Right.
So you see the problem, right? Wherein we are getting the level we're getting at is not even like our safe schools or whatever. They're just random universities.
The ones where they're not random
Well,
universities.
they're not ones that you would call target. That's why we can call them OK schools or whatever you want to call them, but they're not target universities.
So the opportunities that we're floating, we usually float them from partner universities, right? And we don't need to have like a long-standing relationship or MOU with universities to have this.
You're just beating around the bush. His one main point is target universities are the top universities. Students actually do for that. If you want to have such kind of session which Ask Me Anything sessions, you need to focus on those universities.
Right.
You can't focus on just the partner universities. So how are you going to make connections for that is that question, or you don't have that as a part of your program?
No, I just discussed this with the IR office if they would be willing to reach out and push for something like this, and they said yes, we can do this. So
Yeah, so let's conclude this section. Yeah, so we are done with the manifesto debate. So we'll be moving on to the next section, which is topic debate. So we have here 4 sheets with us, and the topics. He will be randomly picking 2 topics, and each topic will have discussion. It will start with candidate's opinion on the topic for 3 to 4 minutes, and then each panelist can have a rebuttal, or they can question for 1 minute each. Even they can give their personal opinion on his opinion on the same topic. So let's just choose the topic first.
नहीं वो मुझे करने हैं. क्या? Summer activity first. Should I start or like are you reading the topic?
We'll just brief audience with the topic. Just give me a minute. first topic is as follows. By dual degree students, the topic is summer activities by dual degree students. As of now, there have been several different efforts to allow dual degree students to pursue activities in their summer period between their final and pre-final year. Some have been successful at academic unit level, although at institute level it hasn't been. This is essentially depriving our students of different activities that they can pursue during this summer time. What are your views? Are there significantly different policies in other IITs, colleges about this? How can this problem be solved in IIT Bombay? How is this problem linked to MTech or MSc students? What are the roadblocks in IIT Bombay?
So to start off very objectively, like is this depriving students of different activities they can do? Yes, the program for dual degree students is made that way. Like this is what happens. So objective, like I understand that is the case. Moving on to, are there significantly different policies in other IITs and colleges? So yes, so IIT Kanpur, Madras and Kharagpur give an option for dual degree students to be able to, so for example, when it comes to internships, students in these three IITs can sit either in the third year or the fourth year. And this also, like to add, reflects in the selection cohorts. So for example, in these IITs, if you look at the selection cohorts for interns, there is a significant chunk of dual degree students that are there. So that is how the policy is different. How can this be solved in IIT Bombay? So like throughout the past 10 years, there has been a push for allowing students to sit in dual degree internships with restructuring the DD program in two ways. So one of them was to so usually what happens is students in the DD program start the literature surveys in the summers and they have to stay here. So the idea of option one was to let them start the literature survey in the winter of the 7th semester, and then move it into the semester. And the second idea was to convert summer credits into courses that they could have taken earlier, and then they can just move on with what they want to do. So that was the solution. Like that is what can be proposed. How is this linked to the MTech and MSc students? So some context on that is like recently with the new curriculum, IIT Bombay is kind of phasing out the dual degree programs, that the intake into dual degree programs through JEE. So the only departments right now that take based on the new curriculum that are going to take DD intakes are going to be EE and environment. And environment, so like this is not written anywhere, but when I was discussing with the HOD, they said they are considering evaluating that as well. So like again, nothing actionable there, but they are evaluating if this should be there. So in this case, the only target audience left for this proposal would be elect students, DD students, like DD students that converted to DD, and then that would be an IEEE students. So when this was pushed through the UGPC, like because of the curriculum revamp and the fact that DD intake is going to get reduced significantly, this was sidelined, and this was supposed to go with the MTech curriculum review. And over there, so like I spoke to the MTech, like I found out about what is happening there, and the idea was they wanted to introduce a course-based masters and like two separate masters, one having a course-based masters and one having a thesis-based masters, where the first one, like we proposed, they just take courses. So this is something that is happening in the master's curriculum revamp. So just
Last
roadblocks.
Last 1 minute for your.
Yeah, like what are the roadblocks that can be faced here? So one, roadblocks on the academic front. So professors are not very hesitant to do this because they think so when it came to the UG policy, they were not very keen on doing this, because then one option was that students would not take literature survey seriously because it's happening in the semester, and the other was that there would be a break in the summers. So that is why they were not keen on it. And on the internship front, so like and also in the problems of that in the UGPC, there was not a lot of inclination to take this forward. So that was the problem on the academic front. And on the placement front, there were you can say subjective discussions on would this be fair to BTech students. So
okay, so essentially the things that you stated were more or less facts that you got from your groundworks or discussions with stakeholders involved. But what you were trying to understand through this topic debate is what is your view on that? We didn't want to hear about what has been done in the past, what are the solutions that have been tried out in the past. what is MTech UG curriculum, MTech curriculum review committee doing? What is your thought, or if you had to work on it, what is the thing that you would like to change, or what is the thing according to you would ensure that this is being implemented? And secondly, you mentioned that as the curriculum is changing, DD program is being phased out, but typically when you think of policies, even if one student is getting benefited from that policy should be in place. So this thought is really wrong, that DD program is being phased out, so this policy is not important. It is as important as it would be for 100 students.
Right. So I wasn't saying that it's not important for me. I was saying that because of this, the committees have sidelined it and they were not very keen to discuss this. Like, that is what I was trying to say. Apart from that, like, if you want my views, so when it comes to summer activities, yes, I think DD students, in that sense, like, there should be some equality to access of opportunity, or like equality to opportunity, not to outcomes, but at least to opportunity. Like, DD students should be able to do something in their summers if they choose. When it comes to specifically, like, if you want me to specifically discuss if DD students should be allowed to sit in placements, so I do not have a very strong disposition on that yet, because through my groundworks, like when I was speaking to the placement managers, first of all, they told me that it would kind of be, they told me very strongly that it would impact the BTech selections and internships. And then I raised the point that when it comes to placements, it gets normalized anyways. Like, companies look at DD students and they realize that they've been here for a year extra. So, like, they normalize it. But the feedback I got from the placement placement manager that I spoke to was that when it comes to placements, a company is giving up like a proper job that the person is going to stick with. But an internship is to a large extent used as a scouting period for potential employees. So in that case, it is not likely that they would do this like normalization or balance it out. So they told me in that case it could be skewed. So again, in terms of being able to do a summer activity, yes, I think it makes sense. But in terms of specifically sitting for placements, I'm not very strongly in favor of that yet.
So I have one question. Like, you said that this policy is in place in other 3 IITs. So have you researched on what are the ways through which they tackle these problems? These are the main problems they might also face.
Right. So I spoke to the placement manager and I told them the same thing, like this happens. And they told me in the other IITs the selections are skewed very badly. Like, they told me if you look at the ratio of DD to BTech students applying, you'll see that DD students get a clear advantage there.
I mean, isn't that the case now, just in the opposite direction? I mean, in internships, companies come because they want to give PPOs. Most companies come because they want to give PPOs. So, they third year DDs have it pretty tough, right? I mean, it's skewed in favor. I mean, you can get data on that as well, right?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
My point is that you're saying it's skewed the other way there, right? That DDs have are getting selected very early, very well, all of that. My point is, in the current system, isn't it the other way around? And when you go to like a Madras where they give the option, it's not that they have to. So third year, I mean, dual degree students don't get to sit in their third years if they're sitting in their fourth years, right? In Madras,
they get to choose, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So my point is, right now, if you institute that choice, you're just skewing it the other way. I mean, is it just because it's status quo, that's why you want to go with it? I mean,
but not because it's status quo. So external opportunities, so like not talking about the academic front, talking from like academically, if we can get approval for this, like when it comes to specifically institute placement, so like placements through the PT cell. So the option for fourth year students to apply externally exists. And like when I was speaking to the placement manager that I spoke to, they said like, of course it is not as convenient, or it's not as convenient, or you can say as much of an it's not as convenient or as easy as it is through the placement cell. Like, that is definitely true. But like, I was coming the way, like based on my interpretations from the conversation, I felt that if this is something that is allowed, the amount like for like the DD students left would be handful, right? Like they would skew up internships for a lot of students compared to just like those students having the option to apply externally.
Do you just feel that this is only the main reason or the problem they might face, like not the other side of the problem, like what the professors do not want them to have the internships, the DDP? So how is that tackled in other IITs that you don't have those ideas?
No, I don't.
And also, as you just rightly said, you're okay with skewed placements or skewed things for few students, right? Because you don't want to cater their problems.
Can you repeat the question?
You just said that, if we go the other way around, still we will be left out with some people who will have these problems, right?
Not having access to opportunities.
Exactly. You are fine with that, no?
Like if as a student representative, if I have to make a choice between these two options, then like
So instead of
evaluating.
figuring out any other workaround, you are okay with some students facing problems as a student representative.
I mean, based on the okay, like based on the existing work and the existing proposals, like on what I could think of, like if of course if I can think of some, like I couldn't think of some new workaround that could fix all of these problems. But if I could, I mean, of course I would, but I couldn't.
Okay, so let's move on to the second topic debate here. So I'll just read out the context here. So it's regarding Students' Gymkhana. The current structure of Students' Gymkhana of IIT Bombay has 6 GSECs, leading their own verticals and duties. The GSECs tend to get occupied with their own division's responsibilities and hence do not get a chance to work together on Students' Gymkhana. What according to you can be done to enhance the role of GSECs in overall development of Students' Gymkhana of IIT Bombay? As a chairperson of DGSC, what do you believe can be done better for enhancing the role of DGSC and department councils in the academic system?
Okay. So first of all, starting with the students' gymkhana. So again, this is something that we can push a request from the admin side. So I think at times a lot of the work that GSs do could be something that potentially the admin could do. So like for example, organizing the logistics for the freshman orientation, right? Or for example, so the NOCS allocation, like pre-COVID, it used to be done entirely by the admin. Like there was no involvement of any GS. Like no GS went and got the data and then they did it. So there are, because that is something that is very objective and the admin can do. Like we have a SAC office. So in cases like those, again, like as a GS, all we can do is request, because we don't have the authority to go and tell the admin to do something. If they tell us to do it, we have to do it. But first of all, I think that is something we can push for. So like in that, like request would be the more correct, precise word. So like that is something we can request. So GSECs are left with, again, they have time to work on other things or things that things that couldn't function without GSEC involvement. Like also more things we could request for, like something like smoothing permissions, because right now, like at least in the past tenure, in my past tenure in the UGC, there wasn't a lot of coordination between the admin offices. So for a lot of UGAC events, specifically from my experience from the past tenure, we would be shuffling between the Dean AP and SA office. So things which take the GSEC's time and the admin could help. So that is something we should outline and request the admin for assistance from. Apart from that, when it comes to the DGSC specifically, so the first thing I think we should do is like a lot of the events that are happening between departments, so the DGSC should convene at specific intervals, and we should be able to share departments and agendas that are happening regularly. So for example, departments have their own POAs, right? The DGSECs, what they want to do with the council, the activities. So a lot of times what happens is a specific department is doing something that is very effective and the other departments could take inspiration from it. So I think on the department level there should be some coordination on what activities we are planning for, say for research. So like when it comes to the DRCs, again, like they're a part of the UGAC and the department councils as well. So on that front there should be some coordination on what activities they're planning for research there.
There is a
Apart from
factual
that,
correction, DRCs are not part of department councils.
yeah, my apologies. They were envisioned to be, they are not exactly technically a part of the department councils yet. So apart from that, I think department councils should also work. They were envisioned to be, they are not exactly technically a part of the department councils yet. So apart from that, I think department councils should also work. We should make the department council should make work reports. Like there is no documentation. I tried finding out. And what happens is in some department councils it's not there, in some councils individual students, like individual members give a report of the work they did, but there is no public work report. And like any elected position there should be a work report. Like if all the GSECs do, then why don't the DGSECs do? So that is there. Apart from that, there should also be a discussion on between DGSECs on the kind of discussions that are happening on in the DUGC based on policies or specific cases. So, like for example, the policy about allowing NPTEL courses, right? There are some departments that don't allow extension students to take NPTEL courses, and this has been tried to push in their DUGCs, but it's not something that is happening. And also, like even ideas. So, for example, in the CS department right now, in my ground notes with the HOD, they said that what they're doing is they're tracking the performance of first-year students. And the students that are performing extremely poorly, like even in the common courses, they're allotting them tutors. The CS department is doing that. So they're allotting those students tutors, like not based on courses, but they're just allotting the student tutors and telling them go and teach the kid in whatever way you can. So like that is another idea, and having precedence on an idea is a very good way to push for that. So that is something that can happen. And I think lastly, as the GSA, we should also try to have some chain for or like a list of or some structure for escalation of problems. So for example, a problem that I discussed in my ground notes was in a specific department, say an instructor is not creating an environment that is conducive for students to learn in whatever way. What happens is the DGSEC would usually go to the HOD at best, the DAMC or DGSEC would go to the HOD and then tell the HOD that this is happening. But HODs in that sense are very hesitant in telling another prof from the same department that they have to do something a certain way. And like when I was doing groundworks with the Dean FA, I talked to them that this is what happens and nothing happens, so can we do something? So like the Dean FA told me, if this is something that is brought to me, I can work on it. And even so, we also have a center, Parimal Center for Learning and Teaching. So like in cases like this, that can also be recommended. So in a lot of cases, there is no method for escalation or there is no set of rules for that.
Okay. So firstly, you had to talk about how this role of GSECs can be enhanced in the student gymkhana, but you spoke about how admin can take up some work which they have allotted to the GSEC so that GSECs have more time. But you didn't exactly speak about what exactly would the GSECs do with their time for student gymkhana. What change do you want to see as a person in student gymkhana as a SGSC? Can you talk about it a bit?
Okay. So like the first thing, like building on the previous point, if a lot of GS points go unfinished, right? And a lot of them happens because of timeline issues or because GSs were busy.
Yeah. I know that. We are not talking about that. We are talking about what is your view on how GSECs can contribute to the student gymkhana community? How they can improve the overall functioning of student gymkhana, and what according to you needs to be changed in student gymkhana? We're not talking about the time management of GSECs.
Okay. So I think one thing which we can do is, as GSECs, is try to be more responsive to students. Like usually right now the accountability measures are we have a GBM in the middle of the tenure, and at the end of the tenure it usually doesn't happen. So in that sense we should try to be more responsive. And for example, we have forums now, like the Inside Discussion Forum exists. So we should, one thing which the GSECs do is be more responsible and accountable to students because they voted for us.
So no structural changes in the current situation. You're just saying that okay, we'll be more responsible, right? Anyway, student representative has to be responsive,
Right.
So what will be the change?
So like
Everything you mentioned is still very individual. Nothing to do with like any sort of collaboration between the GSECs, right? I mean, our council does their own GBM. Inside Discussion Forum has questions for a certain vertical or like a certain GSEC. What about the entirety of the Gymkhana? I mean, that's the question, right? Essentially, that as a collective, what can you do? And
So
what should we do? Yeah, sorry.
Giving an example, IIT Kanpur has the student gymkhana, which has a student gymkhana president. Then there are individual GSECs for each domain. So they work together, and the student gymkhana president essentially takes account of all the GSECs, and they talk about how student gymkhana as a whole can get improved, not about individual domains. So we wanted to understand your thoughts about what can be done to improve the system as a whole, not individually.
Right. So I have no ideas on what can be done structurally. Like,
Okay.
I thought.
One small question on the part you spoke about the department general secretaries and their council. Like this has been said for a very long time that regular meetings would be there and there would be good contribution from them, involvement in policies. But I don't see any like innovative thought or any thought of yours of how exactly would you try to bring them together or how exactly
Right.
would you try to bring them work together or how exactly would you increase the functionality of DGSC?
Right.
Like you're just banking upon the things that they will come together magically.
So a couple of examples that I'd like to give here that I've thought of in my plan of action. So for example, when it comes to DRC selection, right? DRCs are not involved in the, like, DG6 are not involved in the selection in any way, and DRCs are, so they're not officially a part of the department councils, but the vision was that they are a part of the department council and they are a part of the UGAC, and here they contribute to institute-wide centralized research events, and there they can conduct sessions or events department-specific, something more niche. So right now what happens is we do the DRC selections ourselves, like the UGAC does it, and then we tell the DG6 that these are your DRCs. So this is something that I discussed with 4 to 5 DG6 and they said yes. So like there are more positions which have dual roles, like I won't name them, but there are positions with dual roles which are a part of the department council and another council. So something like that should happen. DG6 should be involved in that. So like that is something that will have to be worked upon to get like the DRCs involved in the department councils. And second thing, so when it comes to policy making, right, something that I noticed was like when I was talking to DG6 and talking about policies that they push through the department, when it comes to the policy that is policies that are pushed through the department, the policies that are drafted, they could be a lot more precise. Like there is no formal groundwork or training system in that sense. So that is something that can happen. And one more thing is that the DAV team can contribute in this sense. So when I was speaking to the DAV team heads, they said that when it comes to collecting surveys, it is their expertise to help us design surveys which are like from which we can draw inferences to make more data-driven conclusions. So that is also something that DAV team could assist with.
Just one last question. You have incentivized the DG6, but what incentivizes them to work together? Like one part of the question was also like work as DGSC.
What the question is? What?
One part is also how exactly would you enhance the function of the complete DGSC as a whole? You have incentivized DG6 to work with your council, etc. But like how exactly would you increase their functionality in the DGSC itself? Like just through helping them, make them help on policies.
I'm not clear. Like what do you mean? Increase the functionality?
Like you said that, what do you believe enhancing the role of DGSC? Like enhancing their role, like they are one of the most integral parts.
So what he's saying is, you mentioned that how you are going to enhance the bond between you and the DG6. How are you going to enhance the functionality of DGSC as a whole, where cross-departmental DG6 coordinate with each other and plan out something? How they help each other in developing initiatives or policies?
So two things. One, like I said, we can share our plans of actions, and if even the work reports are shared, we can take inspiration. Say for example, when I was discussing this like with the Empower head, what happens is in the material summit that the Meta department organizes, they have sessions on steel, etc., which even the civil, something kind of that the civil department can contribute to. So in a case like that, if the plans of actions are discussed regularly, so these kinds of things can be avoided. And two, I think before we go on to say like the entire functionality of the DGSE should be increased in some way, we have to ask the question, is the DGSE right now efficient? And I think the answer to that is it is like through my groundworks, the stakeholders did not feel the DGSE operates very efficiently. Like right now there is already so much work to do. So go on to say that we'll increase the functionality so you can do something else.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah. So that concludes the topic debate. So before moving on, I would like to thank all the panelists for their valuable contributions. Yeah. So the next section of the soapbox that we have is background check. So maximum of 5 minutes, and there will be 2 questions. So let me start off with the first question. So in your capacity as finance club manager, there are a lot of events that were planned. So can you just highlight the events that were focused towards the people who want to try finance as a new field? Because being a STEM institute, finance is a niche domain. So firstly, can you highlight those events? Secondly, can you also talk about what was the impact that these events had and how it helped the students to achieve their future endeavors.
Can I take a moment to list
Sure,
down all
yeah.
the initiatives? Can you repeat the second part of the question?
Yeah, so it's basically highlight the initiative that helped newcomers to get introduced to finance. Secondly, what was the impact of the same events slash initiatives, and how did it help the students to achieve something in their life?
Right. So I'll talk about a few initiatives. So the first category of initiatives that are like targeted for people that have absolutely no knowledge in finance. So I'll talk about three initiatives here. The first one being Learner Space. So in Learner Space, we had a program which through a series of 5 sessions we talked about all the possible verticals in finance that students could have interest in. So this is something where they got exposure, like a student that did not know anything, they got a diverse idea of at a very superficial level of all the verticals in finance. So that's one. Second, we had FinCert. So in FinCert, students with absolutely no experience would take up projects under mentors on a specific niche or topic in finance, and they would research that for 2 to 3 months. So that is something like we've seen a lot of students. So the completion rate for FinCert was also very high. We had about I don't remember the exact number, but I know for sure it was 110 plus. So that 110 plus teams or projects. So that is something. Then we also launched a repository on our website for students who want to explore finance but have absolutely no background. So like based on categories, do you want to explore financial modeling, trading? We made a repository. Apart from that, we had some more interactive events as well. Like we had a few competitions, and so competitions in theory they cater to students with every level, but students with prior to every competition we've organized sessions that help students get a clear idea of what is expected and what they can learn and the resources about that. So like we organized an equity research competition, and again the winners of the competition we can't comment on like their difficulty, but prior to that we had 2 to 3 sessions with good turnout. So that is something. We also had a few sessions, like no competition, just sessions scattered around the tenure. So like we had a session with I won't name, but we had a session with a private equity firm in which it was a walkthrough of a case that they had worked on. So like students with absolutely no exposure on private equity, they understood how a firm would evaluate an opportunity. So and apart from that,
Please mention.
in FinFest we also had a few workshops. So like we had workshops on algorithmic trading and option pricing. So
Got it. Yeah. So I guess you talked about the events that you have organized. Can you talk about the impact that these events had?
okay, like impact in what sense? Like tangible sense or like? I'm not
Firstly,
sure.
let's talk about the intangible impact, and next part talk about the tangible impact.
I mean, the intangible impact is what you learn, right? The intangible impact is going to be like if you attend a session and then whatever you learn is going to be your intangible impact. And you've tried to cover a lot of diverse topics through a lot of sessions. So I would say there's a lot of intangible impact there. Apart from that, if you talk about tangible impacts,
Apart from learning any intangible impact, like growth of community or something like that you have noticed through these events.
we've not actively tracked it. So
Got
we've
it.
tried in all our initiatives to create a sense of community. Like, for example, when we launched a bootcamp on financial modeling, we have a group with all the people that registered, and we contacted about 20 to 30 seniors to be a part of there and actively answer doubts. And we asked the investment team members to also be there and answer doubts. So we've not actively tracked it, so I can't give you numbers, but like I would like.
Got it. Yeah. So that's fine. Nextly, let's talk about the tangible impact if you have tracked.
Right. So, for example, in intangible impacts, so one, we made the intern prep boot camp, right? So that is something that had a tangible impact. In fact, like one of the people that got placed in a finance firm in the internship season, I won't name them right now because of the guidelines, but they reached out to us and they said they did our boot camp. That is there. Like I can go on record to say that. So that is there, and also our FinSearch projects. It helped a lot of people like to had made a tangible project to display that on your work.
Understood. Yeah. So let's move on to the second question then. So So, in your previous experiences, not limited to any particular position, what all policy work have you worked on, and what all admin interaction have you had?
Sure, can I take a moment?
Yeah, take a minute.
So there's only two places that I can recall right now where I've had admin interaction and logistics work. One is like when it comes to council logistics, like going to the main building offices every time.
Can you name the administrative bodies that you have worked with? Like the different offices.
Dean SA and Dean AP office.
Okay.
And for FinFest, even the DDIA and DDFEA. So that, and apart from that, the logistical work that I've been involved in was mainly the freshman orientation over there, coordinating the logistics with the entire, like all the UGC heads were involved, so that.
Okay. Any policy work experience that you would like to highlight?
I do not have any policy work experience that has been done. Like for the investment team in the initial phases of our tenure, we were working on the documentation to see if this is something that could be legal. So for that, there is some like policy work that we tried to do, but nothing materialized out of that.
Okay, so policy basically for formalization of investment team, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's when I guess we could conclude this section. Let's move on to the next section. So next section we have next section is Q&A session. So the first part is where we have questions from Inside team. So I would like to invite the 8 board members of Inside team for the first section. In this section we will have a total of a maximum of 4 questions that will be asked, and each section can have a maximum of 5 minutes.
So with respect to the faculty advisor program, you want to bolster the program and push for the creation of a handbook and everything. But what accountability mechanism do you already have for faculty who are professors to actually read this handbook, follow whatever you are saying, and actually do their duties? Is there any accountability mechanism? Without that, how exactly is this going to happen?
Right. So first I'd like to clarify what the book is for. So it's not a set of guidelines or job description that we're giving to them that this is something you have to do. It's going to be more on the lines of these are the things that students reach out to you for. So in the sense that the book does not require accountability, because right now the system is that you just how a faculty advisor is made is a department HOD just tells a FACAD you're a FACAD and students will reach out to you for academic issues. There is no there is nothing given to them to say that students will reach out to you for an approval on this, students will reach out to you for this. Like if a student wants to apply to an exchange program, they'll come to you. So those are things that don't happen. They're just told they'll come for academic issues. So the first thing is going to be that is what the FACAD handbook is going to be for. And the reason it's effective is right now there is no documentation, right? Like right now, you go to a FACAD and a FACAD says I won't do this, I don't know you, because there is no documentation. So like it's there in written. So
Who will be making this faculty a FACAD handbook?
so the GSA Square UG will have to work with the Dean of Faculty Affairs to get this done.
And just to clarify, you think the reason why the system is not as effective right now is because faculty do not know why students reach out to them rather than them being unresponsive to students?
That is a part of it. That is a part of it. I will go on record to say that is some. So it's not that they don't know what they have to do, but the descriptions that they are given are very vague. So in the sense, a faculty advisor program, one part is where the students are facilitating and the other is where the faculty is. So yeah.
No, finish your answer.
Yeah, that's my answer.
Okay, so just so that I understand, a student can approach the faculty advisor for approval for things like going to the exchange. That happens anyways. When I send an email to the faculty advisor, they know that that's what they're supposed to do. You're just going to make a booklet and give it to them for that. How does that change anything?
So right now, so like I have heard cases from students and DG6 were doing groundwork when a student has reached out to a faculty saying that, so like for there was a case where a student needed approval for a week-long exchange program where they just had to get faculty approval. And it has happened in other departments where faculty have approved it. But in the department, the faculty said that I don't know you, why would I approve this, what is my duty? So it has happened in places.
Even with that handbook, the faculty can say the exact same thing.
No,
So-
they can't say the same thing, right? It's there in written. Right now, there is absolutely nothing in written. The faculty handbook does not mention it. They're not communicated what the things the students could reach out to them for in any way.
So you're saying just because it's written in that piece of paper, that without any other accountability mechanism, you can go out and enforce it in that you can force the faculty to approve that particular application? Because as a professor, I can still tell that, right? Even if it's my responsibility to approve, I don't know you as a student, I need not approve that
I
application.
mean, that is the point of having something in writing, right? If you have something in writing, you can go to someone and tell them that this is the duty or not, this is not happening. You can still go to the HOD or some other faculty. But if this does not have, there is nothing in writing, how can you go to a professor and say he's not approving?
So just to summarize, this is in writing, but still a student needs to take it and go to a professor and try holding a professor accountable. There is no other mechanism that you're creating that holds the faculty advisors accountable.
I mean, I'm not very clear on what you want to hold the faculty advisor accountable for. Like, I don't, so like if a faculty advisor is given a list of things that students could reach out to them for, and then, so one, the odds of a faculty advisor refusing to help with a thing that they have been given written instructions to help for, that significantly reduces, because through my groundworks with professors, like I spoke to 5 to 10 faculty and all of them were like, this is a good idea, you should give this to faculty, we're not told you should give this to faculty. So that, I think first of all, those cases will go down entirely. And second, yes, I mean, so like what the student, when you phrase it in the way you phrase that the student has to go and hold the faculty advisor accountable, so like what do you mean by holding them accountable, right? If a student was refused a request that they have to, no, it's a rhetoric, I'm answering it. So when a student requests something that is rejected, like if a student made a request that based on duties has to be approved but is not approved, then they have to go and communicate that to someone who can hold the faculty advisor accountable, right? So that is what would happen. And in the absence of any written document, you cannot do that.
So right now, if I'm unhappy with my faculty, or my faculty has not done something that I think is their job, you go and tell that to HOD. In your side also, just you have a written document, but if they do not follow that, you just tell that to the
in your
HOD,
side, what do you
right?
mean when you say he didn't do his job, right? What is his job? It's not written.
Basically, I tried reaching out to my faculty and they did not respond on time. They did not help with my queries because they were busy with something else and they didn't. What do I do in that situation?
Then you have to draw a line where something like there has to be a. So if you want to hold someone, it is not like a.
Okay, let me make that question easy for you. What are you doing to make it easier for me as a student? I still need to go and tell my HOD that a professor did not respond to my concerns. There is nothing else that's happening in terms of making the faculty advisor program more effective.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing, right? So the faculty, first of all, the chances of that happening in the first place is something that's going to reduce.
Next question.
So the manifesto point about establishing a business development wing under the Consult Club, what exactly is it going to do? How is it different from the things that the Consult Club already does? Could you just clarify that a little bit in the start?
So there's a lot of you can say career profiles that the Consult, that to some extent the closest club that would work on them would be the Consult Club, but they are not exactly things the Consult Club would work on, like roles in strategy, operations, chief of staff, roles like those. So the idea would be to set up like a business development wing under the Consult Club, under like the career cell conducts events under the banner of a policy club, like that.
Okay, so if you're talking about something like strategy, can you give us your vision for like an event that the strategy wing will do or something related to that? Will it still be a consulting case but a strategy case? Like how exactly?
Right.
is
So
this?
when I say strategy here, I'm not talking about strategy consulting. I'm talking about strategy roles in startups. So for example, like just to build on that, those are very popular exit options. So exiting into strategy roles, what sessions could be conducted on those things?
Exit options, as in you mean after the first job or right out of college, just to be clear?
Getting into specific roles, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can continue.
Because so a lot of students do reach out. Exit options is something that students do consider when they're deciding a career, like where they would go from the very next career.
So wait, the strategy role in startups is an exit option for you after your first job, and the Consult Club's business development wing will do events and sessions for that particular thing that is relevant to you 2 years after you graduate.
Yes, because that's something that you will
Yes or
consider
no?
when yes, because that is something you will consider while making your career choice activity. Like the finance club would make something about getting into private equity, and you don't, like, for example, the finance club would conduct a talk about getting into VC, and VC is not something that most students would get into after their 4 years. It's something that you would either have to have had to work for a couple of years here and there, or have had build a startup and sell it. Like those are the two biggest exit options into VC. So that's something that the finance club would conduct. So in the similar way, that is information that needs to be conveyed to students and falls under the purview of the Consult Club, so they'll do it.
The last question here was, there have been promises in the past where you have a separate, say, club or division under the Consult Club already being set up but did not materialize. So what steps have you taken to ensure that this is something that's likely to happen? Like the supply chain club did not materialize as a thing.
What steps have I taken?
Or planned, people
Yeah.
you've spoken to ensure
Yeah.
that this is going to happen for
So
sure.
in future tense, what steps I will take? One of the things that needs to be taken into account is these are roles that are becoming increasingly popular, and as the number of students that have gone into consulting as a profession have increased across IIT Bombay through the past few years, the number of people that will exit into these roles is also increasing, which was not the case earlier. So yeah, in that sense, the thing is that this is something like a lot of new students are getting into. So that is why I think
Just the question was, what have you already done to guarantee this is likely to happen? Something has been done or not? Like in
Right.
your groundworks in the process, just clarify that and we can
Right.
move on to the next.
So I will answer that question. I have not done anything already because I'm not the GSA square UG already. But what the reason that I think that the previous ones didn't work out, and what is something that will keep this one that will ensure this happening is the future prospects in this career. Like the way this field is heading towards, it is something that would be increasingly popular, which is what I think is the ideological reason behind why this would work.
Okay, so the motivation for why that will happen is clear, but why you will do it is, I mean, what has already been done in the process to ensure this will happen is not unclear for us at the end of this question.
So again, to answer your question, I'm not the GSA square UG already, so I can't give
Let's
it to
move
the
on to the next
Consult Club
question.
tenures, Consult Club manager's timeline that integrate this in our timeline.
The third question is about building on ongoing efforts to include all departments, with emphasis on all, under the policy to credit NPTEL courses. In the Senate meeting, some of the HODs did reject the fact that they're going to go ahead and do this. What are you planning to do differently to convince them to give credit to
Can you
NPTEL?
tell me which Senate meet that was and when it happened?
We had this information. We can verify it as a part of EC, but
When the proposal for introduction of NPTEL courses came in, like from what I'm you can have two of these courses for a regular student, and for ARP students
Right.
you can have 4 of them.
Right.
So when this policy was introduced within Senate, there were certain HODs that refused that within their department they'll not be taking they'll not be putting those two credit NPTEL courses as well. What do you do differently in those departments to get this implemented?
What you do differently right now compared to when the policy was pushed is you use the data from the previous since the policy was implemented, you use the data to show the disparity. So right now, chemical and elect, the two departments that don't allow NPTEL courses, they are the most ARP students of all the departments, and so you use the grounds, you push to show that disparity because that is not something you could have done earlier. Like you have the data to show the disparity.
Yeah, we can move to the next question.
the last question is in terms of, so you're following up, just the 2 follow-ups that you're doing, and this is just a clarification from our side. So following up on the implementation of the double majors and the credited R&D projects, these have been there in the pipeline for quite a while.
Right.
What what are the next steps that you're going to do, or how are you going to ensure that they get completed
So
in your
when it comes to the double majors program, the reason it was rejected in the UGPC was that there needs to be a reduction in the credits that the other major is supposed to have. So that is something that will need work on how we can reduce those credits and how that can be adjusted to fit the double majors program structure. So that is about the double majors program, and about the credited R&D projects, there has to be more discussion on the grading. So that is why it's not been.
Is it the grading? Because in the GBM we remember that the problem was also assigning credit to the amount of hours that you put in this, and it was hard for you to assign those credits.
Right.
Is there something that you're going to do to sort of quantify that better, or any ideas there?
So like when I said grading, I meant like the grade, the code. Okay, I wasn't precise enough. But to be precise, the structure. So like, sorry. So that structure needs work on, and we have to use the precedence of the chemical department, because the time when it was pushed, it was fairly new in the chemical department as well, and now we have established precedence from 2 to 3. I'm not sure exactly how many years, but I'm for sure aware that it's been 2 years that it has happened. So we have precedence is basically the crux.
Yeah. So we are done with the insights question. Thanks, Team Insight.
Yep. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being so patient and listening all the way. I've tried my best through my groundworks to identify any student problems that I could work on, and have tried to include them in my manifesto if I could find a feasible solution, a reasonably feasible solution. If you think there's anything that I missed out, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to consider that and see if I can work on that in my next tenure. Apart from that, I'd like to thank the Election Commission and the Insight team as well for facilitating this process for me to be able to communicate all my ideas and what I'm going to do next tenure to you guys. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Deep. Thanks to all the audience members for listening patiently. We hereby conclude the soapbox.